So I was thinking about the Fugitive Slave Act, which is, one of those things right up there with the Dred Scott ruling prior to the Civil War that really kind of ticked the Northerners off. And, there's Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3 already in the Constitution, which says, it doesn't even specifically reference slaves. It just says if somebody's owing you service and they escape or something to that effect, that the state to which they've escaped, no matter what their laws are, needs to return that person, right? Which, owing service is just that could be a number of different things. It could be somebody on work release from prison, all sorts of things. There's a very old principle of several different things. But it's besides the point. I was thinking about this Fugitive Slave Act, and I think it's unconstitutional. Because the Constitution already says that, but it's not an enumerated power to Congress. So the Congress had certain enumerated powers, mostly found in Article 1, Section 8, a little bit in Article 1, Section 9. They were more conditional there. And then there's certain spots throughout the Constitution where it says, like the exceptions clause in Article 3, Section 2, Clause 2, where Congress can create exceptions to which things might be appealed through the Supreme Court, what have you. There is no power enumerated to Congress to catch slaves, to deal with slaves at all. If you look at the powers granted, there's the debts power, which is the power to take loans on the part of the United States. Then there's the general welfare powers, which would include things like, the Commerce Clause, the Immigration or the Naturalization Clause, the Uniform Rules of Bankruptcy, coin money, intellectual properties, the post roads, etc. These are all things that just help the entire general public. They don't try to lift one individual up or anything like that, right? And then you have the common defense clauses. That's it. That's what you've got. And none of these deal with anything regarding persons escaping from service or anything like that at all. So there is that promise in Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3, but that's already a pre-existing promise. Some people could say, the federal government didn't have power to enforce it. I think there were some founders who talked about like that. If the federal government ever tried to go into a state and force these things to happen, it would cause a civil war. I don't know. I disagree. I think that right from the start there was the Take Care Clause, which said the president had the power, not the power, but the obligation to take care that the laws were faithfully executed. And unfortunately, Article 6, Clause 2 defines the Constitution as part of the supreme law of the land. And when you read clauses like Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3, it sounds like it's literally a law, right? Period. It doesn't necessarily have the written out prescribed remedy for violating it. It's besides the point, though. Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1 opens up saying the Supreme Court, or the judicial branch, judicial power would apply to the Constitution itself in law and equity, either one, right? So, anyhow, so the power to enforce that clause was already there. You didn't need a Fugitive Slave Act. And so I just thought I'd bring this up. To me, it compares to the War Powers Act that Congress keeps trying to pass to tell the president what his war powers are and what they aren't. Historically, it was really common for the founders to try to apply the conditions of Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, those conditions that are placed on the states, to try to place those same conditions on the president. And it would not have been hard to have copied and pasted, right, or just to have rewritten those exact same conditions into Article 2, but they didn't. There's a Take Care Clause, there's a Commander-in-Chief aspect of it, and the Army's in actual employment. They're actually there. They are to be used. This is the historical natural responsibility of a Commander-in-Chief as it is. But historically, the same one who was the commander-in-chief didn't usually also have all the diplomatic powers and a take care clause and what have you. That's what we created. We created something very unique when our Constitution was created. And so I think the founders were actually trying to figure it out. They didn't have all this hindsight that we have. But yeah, I would say the Fugitive Slave Act was unconstitutional. Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3 was already enforceable by the federal government. Although they should be doing things tactfully when they do it. And no branch has been given the power to tell the other branches what the Constitution says and doesn't say for their branch, right? Obviously, that's a common sense thing. The bias would be for the legislature to read the Constitution, granting themselves more power, and the president and the judicial less. The strictest possible reading for Article 2 and Article 3, right? But the most broad possible interpretation for Article 1. The president would read the most broad possible interpretation for Article 2, but the strictest possible interpretation for Article 1 and Article 3, right? And then, the courts would read the strictest possible interpretation for Article 1 and Article 2, and the broadest possible interpretation for themselves. Sooner or later, something like that's going to happen, right? So, it's all turned into a gradual centralization thing, though. That's all there is to it, of course. But again, I think the main point I just wanted to make is where the Constitution says something, or you think it says something, unless the power is actually enumerated in the Constitution, such as Congress shall have the power to tell the president what his war powers are. Unless it has something to that effect, the power doesn't exist. And Congress shall have the power to oversee the enforcement of the relationship, the Article 4 promised relationships between the states. But no such power is granted to Congress. And so I think it's just an unconstitutional law. Obviously, slavery, I think, is absolutely wrong, of course. I think that John C. Calhoun, it wasn't until 1837 he started calling it. But was he defending against something even scarier than slavery? That's something that a lot of people will probably want to debate for a long time. And honestly, I think it's a fair debate. It just is. I mean, there's nothing scarier than an excessively empowered central government who claims the power, beats you up if you don't like it, and then once they beat you up, they call it settled law, right? So that's the official procedure for settled law. The official procedure for settled law is the federal government is stronger than you are, and if you don't go along with what they're saying, they're going to beat you up. I mean, honestly, truthfully, that's the history of the whole thing. So that's what settled law means. Settled law means we didn't follow any of the constitutional procedures at all. We didn't stick to the enumerated powers, but we feel it's right, and we're the federal government, so we say it's so, and we're just going to do it. Anyhow, thanks for listening, you guys. We'll see you.